Hello, this is Anthony. Let's walk and talk. So today, we're going to talk about the programmed you. We're going to talk about the programmed you, and we're going to talk about why it's important to understand the programmed you, as well as ways that the world programs you. Now you say, Anthony, we've talked about this in the past. We're going to sit here and enjoy this cool shade area. You're going to say, Anthony, we've talked about this in the past, and maybe I don't believe you, or maybe I feel like I am totally me. There is nothing in me that's programmed. But I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the psychology around it, how it's done, who does it, why they do it. We're going to have a full-on discussion about the programmed you today. And the reason why this is important is because, you see, until you can start to see the programmed you, sometimes it's difficult to see the cycles that you create in your life, the sequences that keep reappearing over and over again, that until the sequence comes to an end or until you are well into the sequence, you just don't even realize that you're in the sequence. And these are the sequences or cycles it's important to understand why, being able to be conscious and view these helps you to grow and evolve, and helps you to have a more satisfying life, helps you to have a life that is more fulfilling and more vibrant, more interesting. You see, humans like stability. Humans like consistency. The system understands that. Families understand that. Companies understand that. Governments understand that. They all understand these things about human beings. We've already had this conversation multiple times. Psychology shows that by the time you're 35 years old, 95% of who you are is programming. So how does that happen? And when it happens, does it happen for purpose? Does it happen for nefarious purposes? Sometimes yes and sometimes no. So let's start with the family aspect of program and why that's important. You see, again, we've talked about this. Psychology backs this between the ages of 0 and 7 years old are when you are the most programmable in life, because everything is where you are learning how to live within the family unit, and the family unit is trying to teach you how to live within the framework of society. But again, remember, within the framework of society is the family's view of the framework of society. So the most important thing is to get you to fall in line into the story of the family, into the programming of the family, into how you interact in the family dynamic. And usually that's done unconsciously, because usually what happens is a parent will, or two parents will have, let's say, a traumatic childhood, and they'll say, I don't want to inflict that on my children, but they didn't heal it. So what ends up happening is they end up falling into the same loops that were programmed into them as a child by their parents. And so they end up putting you into the same perspective of thought as everyone else. Now the difference is we say family is one of the most important things. So what happens is this illusion, this programming is the strongest bond that ties you to your life. Because what you're told is if you step away from your family, there's something wrong with you. If you resist, being compliant with the family, that there's something wrong with you. When in reality, it may be that you recognize there's something wrong with the situation. So the programming begins in terms of watching how the parents interact and how they treat you, and where you place yourself in that dynamic, or where you are in some cases placed in that dynamic. You see, when you sometimes you're viewing compassion from the wrong perspective. Sometimes you view compassion as, oh, my dad is silent because my mom is yelling at him, not realizing that what may be occurring is your dad may be completely dismissive, avoidant, and your mom may be anxious attacher, and that dynamic is playing out, and what's occurring is she's just trying to reach and connect, and he's continuing to distance himself because that's how he was taught to handle conflict. You see, a lot of people in these situations, they learn from their parents how to handle conflict. And a lot of times what happens, especially in avoidance, is you're told to take your emotions and stuff them down. You're told that a relationship without conflict is the relationship you should be in. But the issue with avoiding conflict and stuffing conflict down is that there is no true connection. There is no authentic change or growth. There is no evolution. It's a dynamic that doesn't change, and it's not healthy. Science will show you that stuffing your emotions is extremely unhealthy, and it usually results in a multitude of very poor physical health options later in life. You see, and so we're programmed into this dynamic. So we go out in the world and we find partners to mirror these dynamics back. And then a lot of times when you haven't completely healed or you're still on a healing journey and you attract in a healthier partner, well, they don't fit within the dynamic, so you try to create the dynamic with them. And when they approach you in different manners in order to try to resolve things, even if it's not within the confines of what you're used to, it feels unfamiliar. Again, keyword familiar, family. And so in doing so, the dynamic starts to shift, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it can shift you into a more secure position, but a lot of times it depends on your resistance to that shift. Now let's talk about the other aspects of the programmed you. You see, in past video we talked about how a lot of times, because people, we so readily want to give our power away, we move to things like religion. And what happens is we decide we want to change in our life, so we go to church, and then we start hanging out with people at church, and then the illusion is that we've changed, and so we say that God found me, God saved me. And we give all of our power away from saying, hey, I was the one who made the choice that I didn't want this lifestyle anymore, and I made some mistakes in my past, and I don't want to repeat those mistakes. So I chose to put myself in a different environment where I am not around folks who I feel less empowered, and I continue to make those mistakes. I changed my environment. The problem is that you go from one programmed area into another programmed area, because now you've changed the us versus them from one egoic side and created the us versus them to add another egoic side. It's not the answer either. Now let's talk about companies and governments and how they program you. You see, they're programming depending on what country you're in, because having viewed things like watching the television, telling a vision, programming you, in many countries, you see that governments definitely use different ways to control and manipulate the populace. It's always through fear. It's always through identifying that non-compliance is in some way antisocial and not productive for society. But it's always the same game plan. You see, they'll come on TV, they'll come on the news, they'll throw all sorts of information at you that they tell you should be afraid of. And then what happens is your neural pathways will begin to essentially create cognitive dissonance and cognitive bias into those negative things, and you start to change your belief system. Things like everything out there is scary, everything out there is dangerous, other people are dangerous and scary, other countries are dangerous and scary, when the truth is none of this is absolutely none of this is true. Your perception is your perception, and understand there are about 8 billion perceptions on the planet. So even if one perception, let's just say even if my perception differs from that 8 billion, and I show a life of love and safety and there is nothing to fear, well, even that one anomaly means that there is not a totality of the anomaly, a totality of the belief system, which means if there's only one me, there may be others, and if there's others, then maybe, just maybe, the belief system might need to be questioned. Now we're going to go to the most heinous part: companies. How companies use you to create brand awareness, brand recognition, and brand loyalty. You see, they'll do different things. It used to be in politics, we used to just talk negative about the other person and say this person is bad and I'm so good, and people would buy that, and that's why they would vote. And then we switched it a little bit to say, here's what I believe, and they don't believe that, and because of that, they won't do what you need them to do. But with companies, what they do is they use different things that trick the brain, trick the mind into believing. You see, even as a child watching television, watching cartoons, I can still remember jingles of things like toy companies, cereal companies, coffee companies, all of these different companies that they created these little jingles that would stick in your head with the purpose of creating a brand loyalty. So you would always go buy those brands. And the biggest brands were the ones that were the best at it. You see, programming isn't what people think it is. Programming isn't sitting you in a chair like you would see on TV with flashing lights and all the things around you. No. You see, programming is much more subtle. Programming is much more subverted, because if you knew you were being programmed, then you could and would likely resist programming. But because you don't actually know you're being programmed, that's when you see the nefarious parts of the purpose of these things that come out. But what say you? How do you feel about programming? Do you think and understand the concepts of programming a human and how it's accomplished? Are there other ways that you see it that it occurs? I'm truly curious. As always, if you enjoy this content, please like, share, and subscribe. I am truly grateful. And until I talk to you again, peace, love, light. I hope you have the most amazing day.